All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and start. People filter in. I'm sure they can figure out themselves what's going on. But hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Marshke. I am the founder of a new startup here in T-Rex in St. Louis called Dossibay or Dossibay. I don't care how you say it, as long as you spell it right. I'm sure it will pop up in the search results. And today I'm going to talk about the idea of security and just the overall principle of what we should expect to be on the internet and what we are doing right now and what we should be doing in the future. And I'm going to try to break it down for you guys. It's going to be a little technical here and there, and I apologize for that. I'll try to avoid that. But I'm a very technical guy, so I'm excited to get into the questions with everything. So, like I said, my name is Kevin Marshke. The product Dossibay, I'll talk about it a little more towards the end. It's a file sharing service. At the end of the day, we're all sharing information, so we got plenty to talk about. So let's begin. I got my keyboard over here. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. So if we're going to talk about information, the first thing we should talk about is what actually is information. We have to define what we're talking about before we're talking about it. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I have a surprise for you. I'm going to give you a definition of information that you never heard before, and you probably will never hear again. That's right. This presentation right here will have an exclusive definition of information that you probably will never hear again in your life, but you'll keep thinking to yourself, is that really information? So what is information? Anything that can be copied. Simple. If it can be copied, it's information. You keep thinking of all these different cases, like, well, I can't technically copy a trash can. You don't have to measure it and then take all the colors, write it down, and then I can copy the trash can, right? If you want to make another trash can, you have to take the information, copy that, and with a different set of matter, you can make a trash can. So that's how I define information, anything that can be copied. And there's a problem to this. Because information is very delicate to a lot of us, if information was infinitely copied, we'd have a lot more issues than we have today. We have privacy. We don't want information always to be copied if we keep it private or special to ourselves. And then we have intellectual property, so things like patents, trademarks, books and stuff like that. We don't want them to be copied infinitely. We want to have control of what can be copied, but it's difficult because, as we see right here, anything that can be copied is information. So if we prevent the copying of it, it's not information anymore. So what are some ways we can stop it from being copied? And I do want to touch a little bit. The best way to stop information from being copied is to destroy it. But we're not going to talk about that today because it's pretty easy how that works out. Because when you destroy it, you lose it. You don't want to lose information. You just want to limit how much it's copied. This is the fundamental principle of privacy, right? So let's just have a quick interview. I got this little graphic for you guys. So at the top there, we got no protection, public domain stuff. Not going to touch on that too much, but here we have the little bit of information saying you're doing great. That's information. You're doing great, right? But there's also a legal protection we can add to it. We're going to call this agreement protection, right? So we agree that we limit the copying of it, and it's you're doing great copyright, right? We're all familiar with copyright, how it works. It's basically put a set of rules that we all follow. Then we have physical barriers to prevent something being copied. And that's literally taking the information, putting it in a box, and make sure that box can't be opened. In this case, I just kind of put a box over it. So the only way you can look at the information is by physically getting past it, right? And then finally, we have encryption, which is the big guy. I'm not going to touch on it too much. We'll go into it deep later. Encryption is something new. It's honestly the result of the information era. It's something that our minds can't really wrap around too well. In this example, you see a jarbled mess. Why is that important? Well, it's crazy because you can copy it, but at the same time, you're not losing the ability to not copy it. Well, we'll get into it a little bit. So let's dive into our first, the agreement. So first thing we have to say is, what are some examples of protected by agreement? And a lot of it's familiar with it. Terms of service or privacy policy. You see those links all the time when you go to any website. You scroll all the way to the bottom, they have those two links, the terms of service and the privacy policy, which in turn tells you what you are allowed to submit to us and what we are going to do with it. And if you look at a lot of the privacy policies today, they're not great. In fact, the only reason we have privacy policies would be because back in 2000, the year 2000, parents were concerned because their children were on the internet and they were posting a bunch of information they consider very private. So the only reason we have the privacy policies in the first place is to protect the kids. No one's really thought about it. I was like, well, what about just protecting people in general? And to this day, and this also falls under governing law, because in the U.S. we don't have much governing law that dictates what you can and can't do with someone's information. And for the common folk, just U.S. adults, you can't. There is no limit. You can send it to everyone. You can sell it, and that's why we have the weakness of agreement. This was supposed to work because we're all supposed to agree of what not to do, but in the industry, we have these things called bad actors, right? And these are either hackers, data brokers, or criminals. So if you submit your information to Google, well, a Google employee can easily just look at it. And in fact, if you look at Google's privacy policy, when you're like using Gmail, their privacy policy does not say we will not look at your emails. They will, they can. And same with your pictures, your photos. And I'm sure some of you with Android phones, I mean, me personally, if I take pictures of my dog, right? Suddenly out of nowhere, I get this notification from Google. It's like, hey, we automatically made this album of all the pictures of your dog. That's an indication that they are looking at what you're doing. So agreement is family. The idea of just agreeing like, okay, let's be okay. Let's not share people's information. No one's following that, and it's really not doing anything good, even though it should be. So we can't trust that. Which brings us to the next level. That's physical barriers. This is the one we can wrap our heads around, right? If you want to keep something secret, well, you go back, bury it in the back of your yard, and that's it. Congratulations, you prevent it from being copied. And the only way you can access it is with your knowledge, with your permission. Is someone allowed to access your information? However, more practical examples digging in your backyard is, safes or firewalls, or just turn off the computer. That's right. If you save something on your computer, or let's say you take a picture with your phone, if you turn off your phone or disconnect your internet, well, that's a physical barrier. You're preventing someone from gaining physical access to the information. I know it's hard to understand that the idea of a picture on a phone has a physical representation, but it does, even though it's just a bunch of electrons floating around in your little phone there. Those things are complicated, but those are some examples. But in reality, the idea of physical barriers doesn't work anymore because this nice little invention called the cloud. We want to take pictures and we want to post stuff, we want to share stuff, and we want to make sure that when we do that, it's available everywhere, right? And it's handy. The idea of the cloud is handy because if you take a picture or you have a bunch of videos or things you really like on your phone, if your phone gets crushed, you can just go get another phone and it syncs with the cloud and you have all your stuff back. And that's why the idea of physical barriers is really not used today, even though it's the easiest to wrap our head around. And even if it is stored in a really secure data center somewhere with massive amounts of security and stuff like that, cameras, at the end of the day, you don't own that data center. Amazon, your whole Amazon, everything you ever bought on it is in a data center. And guess who has access to that? Amazon, and you, and anyone who hacks you, and anyone who hacks Amazon. So the idea of physical presence really isn't stopping people from doing malice things. So what's the solution? We need the convenience, but we also need security and privacy. So that's why a bunch of nerds invented this thing called encryption. It's the best thing to solve this because we can basically save things in a different location that's way more secure physically, but at the same time, we still have access to that information without having the ability to be copied. So what does it actually do? Well, it makes the information unable to be copied. Sure, you can copy the encrypted form of it, so it's all scrambled. You can copy that over and over and over and over again, but at the end of the day, information is useless without the idea of a key. The key is basically a password. You enter a password in every day. You enter a password, it decrypts the information so you see it. So that way you can store it on the cloud, but the people who own the cloud, they don't have access to it. But if you're over here and you want to download from the cloud, you can download the encrypted information, use a key, and decrypt it. It's a really, really smart idea. And we use it for centuries, mainly in the context of war and secrets like that. But we're talking about just I don't know, just pictures of our grandkids and stuff like that. Just stuff that's not really important, but for some reason we want to still have some sort of grade of privacy. No one could have thought this would come in humanity, but there's our solutions to it. But the idea of encryption, sure, it's a good idea, but who's actually using it? No, no one's using it. No one's using the idea of encryption, even though it's possible. The technology, it's been invented, it's been proven. No one's using it. So, anytime you're using Facebook, Google, Instagram, Amazon, YouTube, it's they have access to it. And if they want to give your information, or do you want to sell information, or use your information to swing an election, or they want to put you in a demographic and better control the population, they can. And they have privacy policies saying they will. And we've seen evidence of that. If you guys remember the big debacle with the 2016 election, they got on Facebook, and these guys downloaded all these people's information, able to swing their thoughts based on what they have, based on their personalities that they have submitted to Facebook. And they never agree to any of it. No one ever agrees to being targeted by ads or anything like that. I mean, they'll argue it's like, well, you accepted our privacy policy, but none of you read that. Anyways, how will we use encryption in the future? Because clearly this isn't working out. And if you guys watched the Congress hearing, they pulled in all the CEOs of big tech, and they were asking this, like, what are you going to do? No one really had any solutions. So going into the future, we're going to need something different. And that's what we're going to call is the new era. How do we solve this? How do we have everyone to conveniently store their information in any location around the planet while still being able to control of who and how they use it? Well, the first thing we've got to do is encryption has to be everywhere. All information under control must be encrypted. When I say not in direct control, that means you submit it to Facebook, or you submit it to Google, or you submit it to Instagram, right? You post a picture on Instagram. You must have control of that picture to put in a physical barrier, but you don't. You submit it to a data center somewhere in California. It's not in your control anymore. It needs to be encrypted. So that way the only people who have access to it are the people you give it to, such as your followers or yourself, or whatever. So that's a long way. And to be frank, the technology to do this is limited. It's very recent that we are able to do this at all with this amount of availability. Computers have been getting faster and faster. Encryption's been getting easier and easier. There's new innovations. People are realizing the idea of privacy and security is like, oh, it's an important thing to be talking about. So what is this technology now? Well, the thing is, this is where my product comes in. There's two things I've done. I've done extensive research of who actually encrypts stuff when you submit it to them. And that is our product that we've made. The reason I made it is because nothing else is doing this. And there's also Firefox Send. You guys probably never heard of it. It's mainly a small project that Firefox, the browser company, kind of put. And those are the only cloud-based applications that have the capability to submit something to it while it's still encrypted, while they still don't have access to it. And there's a bunch of names I have for this, but I have a list of just two things right here. You guys like, oh, surely something else does this. Yeah, but any example I give, you're never going to hear about it. Those are the two big ones. There's a whole bunch of side projects, a whole bunch of universities have these little tools they do it with. Some law firms have it. I haven't found a single piece of accounting information. So you're sharing your tax information with all these accountants and stuff like that. Well, they don't encrypt the information, which is a stupid idea. So let's dive into Dossibay and exactly what we do different. First thing is I made this strictly to bring us a new era. I made this as a proof of concept to begin with. I didn't really make this to make $1 billion, but I'm starting to realize the reality of how important this technology is. Dossibay is a piece of technology that with the encryption standard is so freaking incredible. It's NSA grade, standardized by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which means it's used in the military, communicating submarines that use the same technology to talk about who and where it's going, which is very important, needs to be very secret, and it's unbreakable. No one's figured out how to crack it, and no one will, probably for another 500 years or something like that. And I took this technology that was available, and I mixed it up with this other concept I've invented called client-side encryption. It's not unique. It's not something brand new, but it's something I managed to put together and package into a website, Dossibay. And the reason this technology is so rare to find between Dossibay and Mozilla Firefox and Firefox Send is because it is just now possible to do this. Like, this is just now available to do in a browser. This is just now available to do across the internet. And when Google Drive was invented, for instance, or Dropbox, they didn't have this at their hand. Would they use it when it was available, when they did make it? I don't know, probably not. They don't really care about privacy because that's what they make their money off of. We don't. We make our money simply just, having a very secure platform. And this kind of, when you mix these two technologies, something magical happens. And the fact is I don't know how else to put this, but Dossibay, when you upload something to Dossibay, it becomes what we call Fifth Amendment proof, which basically means, this is really interesting, you'll never think of this, but you put a file on our service, and let's say the government comes knocking on our door with all the resources they have, and they say, we need to figure out who put this file up there and what the file is. It is impossible, mathematically impossible for us to tell them that. The only way they would have access to your information, or the only way I would have access to the information you submitted to me, I don't even have access to it, is if you grant me that permission, if you give me the password. If I don't have that, it is impossible. This idea of the new era can help so many different problems that we have, all these data breaches, or all these, these election swings, all these data brokers, all these hackers. It fixes all of it. And it's because, at the end of the day, information that you submit, that's information you own. You should have the ability to dictate who has and who hasn't access to that information, not by an agreement, because that's not working. Physical barriers is too inconvenient, but by encryption, you basically allow who can decrypt your stuff, and that's now possible. The technology that we have at Dossibay makes that possible, and it's incredible. I cannot wait until more people start to do this, more people start to adopt our technology. That way they can use the internet without ever having to worry about, just like losing stuff or having people access their things, or just weird people being weird and stalking you. It solves all those problems. It's basically the best of both worlds between the convenience of the internet and the privacy of, just keeping everything to yourself. It's awesome. So as you can see, this is the best thing since sliced bread, I think. I mean, you've probably never heard of it. You probably don't think it's a big deal, but at the end of the day, this is going to be, the fabric of the new internet going into the, the next century or something like that. And I'm glad to be like one of the first people to step into this. And I think it's a good step. And people should start asking, it's like, is this encrypted when I send it? Do you have a key to unlock it if I'm not around? Like, is it even possible for you to look at it? Like, who has access to it? If we were in the case of like China or something, this is actually illegal in China because they know it works. They know that this allows someone to be completely private with themselves. But that's just my factual opinion. I understand a lot of this is a short presentation. I don't have much to say. I just have the evidence I have. But I understand some of this was technical, so I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone have, and I understand that some of you are less concerned than others with the idea of privacy. So if you have any ideas or questions about that, let me know. So that's the end of the presentation. So anyone got any questions?